Hi all. These are generally conversations between adults after the children have left the table. The language can be spicy and the subjects can get saucy. So if you're ready, this is the Southern Fork. Unscripted kitchen chats and also studio chats with some of the most interesting voices in the culinary South. I'm Stephanie Burt, a food and beverage writer based in Charleston, South Carolina, who travels with her fork to write for a variety of publications, from magazines you might have on your coffee table to the website you love to visit for your favorite recipes. And I'm inviting you to come behind the scenes with me to get to know the people who make this Southern culinary landscape so special. I'm always hungry for the next bite, thirsty for that next sip, and ready for the next conversation. Let's dig in. The Southern Fork is presented this year by Townsend Automotive in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. For more than 40 years, the Townsend family of dealerships has been a locally owned company built on service and connection with its customers. And their experienced team can walk you through the whole process, side by side, from test drive to service oil changes and beyond. I've loved tooling about the southern backroads and superhighways this season in a Townsend Honda CR-V. And now I'm hooked on the great gas mileage, the comfortable maneuverability, and that backup camera for parallel parking success. Visit townsendhonda.com for current inventory, or if you're in West Alabama, stop in. Townsend Automotive salutes local entrepreneurs, from restaurateurs to podcasters, and they welcome you to be part of a community that does the same. The Southern Fork's culinary sponsor is Shermer Pecans. It's baking season, and in the South, that often means baking with pecans. From pecan pies to cookies to sticky buns topped in syrup, pecans play an important role in many of the sweet classics of the Southern table. Shermer is a classic too. Fifth-generation growers in South Georgia who turned me on to just how good a fresh pecan can be. They're harvesting them right now to be on your holiday table this season, and they have lots of different size and package options. Visit ShermerPecans.com to place your order or to order a sweet treat for gifts, such as dark chocolate-covered pecans, available by the case, and they arrive already perfectly wrapped in green foil packaging. That's ShermerPecans.com, SCHERMER Pecans.com. Taste how good a fresh pecan can be this season. After a week of thinking about cooking turkey and a day of eating it, you might want to consider something else. So, come with me to the Gulf of Mexico, where the sand is white and the seafood is plenty. This is the source of inspiration and menu items for Adam Evans, chef and co-owner, along with his wife Suzanne, of Automatic Seafood and Oysters in Birmingham, Alabama. Housed in a former mid-century warehouse, a table here has been one of the hottest in town since the restaurant opened in 2019. Adam started his career in Fairhope at the Grand Hotel, spent time cooking in some of the best kitchens in New Orleans, has worked as the executive chef of private events for Tom Colicchio's team at Kraft in New York City, and was the opening chef of the Optimist in Atlanta for Ford Fry in 2012. Automatic Seafood and Oysters was a James Beard Foundation finalist for Best New Restaurant in 2020, And here he brings his passion for seafood back to his home state of Alabama. Hey, Adam, welcome to the Southern Fork.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm sitting in my house with the window open in Charleston, South Carolina, because it's 73 degrees. Where are you sitting today? I'm sure it's some place really amazing, right?
I'm actually on the roof of Automatic Seafood and Oysters in Lakeview, Birmingham.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I'm so sorry that we have to do this remotely, and we had talked about this, but I happened to be there on a weekend that you were not there. So I ate pretty much 2/3 of the menu, I think, alone, and but we didn't get a chance to chat at the next day. So I didn't want to leave our chat for too long, so until I was there next year. So I really appreciate you doing this remotely, even though we all know it's kind of annoying. So I loved my meal, and I love seafood. So I really want to get nerdy with you today about seafood, because you're a seafood nerd too. I think the Optimist, cemented that, right?
The Optimist definitely cemented that, but I kind of became a seafood nerd when I first started cooking seafood in at Craft Restaurant in New York City, and I got the chance to work what we call the fish roast station, and I think I worked that station for 13 months straight, so a little over a year. I got to see all the different types of fish. We would have 6, 7, up to 10 different species of finfish on the menu. And so it was really kind of eye-opening for me to work with that kind of variety of fish and just see the subtle differences day in and day out. Mm-hmm. And so I would say I really fell in love with seafood when I was in New York.
Craft is the Tom Colicchio machine. So the resources are really were big. So you got to see a lot of variety. Did you have a particular fish that became one of your favorites?
There are many, and I think a lot of people ask me that question, like, what is my favorite fish? But it's hard. It's a hard one to answer. But I do remember we got in John Dory, and it was the first time I saw the fish, and we got in John Dory from somewhere in Rhode Island, and the John Dory, all of their bellies were full of squid, so they were eating a ton of squid and probably really happy, and they were just such beautiful fish. And if you've never seen a John Dory, it's kind of a majestical looking fish, and so of course we got it in whole, and we got to butcher it, and we could see what was inside what they were feeding on. But then after cooking it quickly became one of my favorite fishes, and it still is. But they don't live in the Gulf, so I kind of stay away from them these days.
So talk to me about how they cook up. Are they a firm fish, or I've only had it a couple times, so.
It's kind of hard to compare it to something else. I think what it kind of reminds me of is triggerfish, where the meat's really sweet, but sometimes when we would cook it, it's got kind of firm, medium-sized flakes, but a nice sweet finish to it. Honestly, didn't taste like fish, so it has a really kind of meaty quality to it, which I really liked.
Now, when you moved down to Atlanta, you definitely started making a name for yourself, and you started to really gather accolades. Did that change how you were able to work? Did that give you more creative freedom? Did it give you less? Did you feel more of a responsibility? Can you talk to me about that professionally?
I don't think it really affected us. It kind of maybe just gave us a little confidence in what we were doing. I mean, it wasn't me getting the accolades. It was a restaurant, and there's a lot of moving parts in there. So it was definitely a team effort, and I don't think it slowed the creative process down. I think it definitely helps it. It makes you feel like what you're doing is noteworthy, so you can kind of keep doing the same thing, or even push it further. So it was just a great honor and nice to be recognized. So that's kind of all I thought of it.
Yeah. It just really depends on the person, and the creative. And sometimes it can be a heavy lift, or sometimes it can really like let you spread your wings a little bit. But when you
Right.
decided to move to Birmingham, I had heard of you, of course, by that point. And so I was just beginning to understand really the connection between Atlanta and Birmingham. I see it as almost a second city for Atlanta chefs, as far as, you might want to cook there for a while, but it's really not that far away. How do you see
Hmm.
it?
Well, I mean, I see Birmingham as kind of home for me.
Mm-hmm.
A long time ago, when I was just a line cook right out of college in New Orleans, I remember getting a Frank Stitt's book and, um, reading about learning about Frank Stitt and following some of the recipes and reading through his books and thinking like, all right, this guy's from Coleman. And I remember saying it while I was there, like one day I'm going to go back to Birmingham and open a restaurant like Frank Stitt. And so for me, it never really kind of left my mind. I always wanted to come home
Mm-hmm.
and do it because I think one great thing about home and my where I grew up is that it allowed me to go out and I was able to follow a path to start learning to cook in New Orleans and then really learning a lot in Manhattan and then coming back to Atlanta and then finally being home to kind of put together everything I've learned and also
Mm-hmm.
keep learning.
Well, you really you chose a great time to open a restaurant.
Yeah.
But how was it planning your own restaurant versus opening other people's restaurants? Because you are, pegged as somebody that could really do that, and that's important too because you have to, make a good first impression. So.
Right. Yeah, well, it's, to speak about the creativity, I will say that when you're opening a restaurant for someone else as a chef, you have nothing to do except be creative. And so there's a sort of liberty there where you don't have all of the day-to-day small problems that you have to hear about and have to discuss and figure out and make a plan for. And so it just allowed me more time, I think,
Mhm.
to be in the kitchen and to only think about food. And honestly, it's a privilege to just be a chef. It's a lot different than being an owner, which both are great and both have their rewards. But for me, I didn't want to stop until it was my own, so I just kept going.
Well, when you came into Birmingham, it's already an established food scene.
Right.
Definitely because of Frank, but I've made no bones about how almost every meal I had in Birmingham, from hot dogs to Chez Fanfan, was outstanding. I mean, your city, for the size, has just an amazing amount of good food. Do you have interaction with other chefs? Do you feel like there's a community that is supportive, or do you're opening right before all of 2020 happened? So, did you
Hmm.
do you feel like you have chef buds that are helpful and sourcing and
Oh,
farm connections and
yeah,
all that?
yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of great chefs and a lot of great restaurants, and I will say it's just it's very different from all the other cities I've been in because I think it's on a smaller scale, but I think, like you said, and I've talked to a lot of people who come in from out of town, and they say something similar to what you're saying is that, oh, we've had like the best 3 days of eating here. It's an amazing food town, and it is. The hot dogs are one thing. It's been around for a long time in Birmingham, and so they do it really well. And there's a lot of like these small hot dog shops that make excellent hot dogs. And there are other great chefs that in town that were super helpful. And I remember Frank taking some time to sit down and talk with me before we opened the restaurant. James Lewis from Batola. And several other chefs around town helping me source and Victor King at the Essential, providing me, here's the farmers you need to know, and here's, this and that. So it's everyone was super helpful, and there is a great community of chefs here. And I look forward to doing more events around town with the local chefs, because we just haven't, we were, I think 1 year or not 10 months into our first year before the pandemic started. So there hasn't been much time for that,
Right.
but maybe next year.
Maybe next year. So when you're talking about sourcing, how many hours are you from the Gulf of Mexico?
If you average about 90 miles an hour, you can get there in 4 hours.
And that's how you drive. So that's awesome. You really use the Gulf as the basis of the menu at Automatic, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's everything to me. I think it's a place I grew up going to, and so I have a really kind of special connection to it. It is close, and we were able to go there. I was fortunate enough to go there most every summer when I was a kid, sometimes a couple times. And I've always loved it. I haven't always loved seafood. I remember as a kid not eating seafood and not liking seafood. I remember a family dinner we had. We would have our cousins and friends in town, and we would go to the beach. And I remember one time we went to a seafood restaurant, and I was very disappointed. And so I asked if I could go play mini golf while they ate seafood, because my seafood experiences, I just didn't enjoy the food. I did like shrimp. Mm-hmm. Which I would mostly eat shrimp. But I do remember eating at a seafood restaurant and thinking it would be so cool if I got crab legs. And so I got them, and they were king crab legs from Alaska. Right. And I remember asking the server, because we could see the water, and I was like, do these crabs live in the Gulf? And he said, no, these are from Alaska. And I remember thinking at a really early age, like, that is so dumb that why wouldn't you serve something from right here? And so I think I kind of grew up not disliking seafood. Remember people getting me to try salmon while I was at the beach. It just wasn't good. I didn't like it. So I never really cared for seafood growing up. Being so close now, it's a really special place to me. So I want to get, if I could put every dish that was on the menu from the Gulf of Mexico, then that would be, that's where I'm trying to get. And for the most part, we're doing that.
Well, and the menu changes a lot. It's based on your sourcing, and you've had different programs. You've worked for some big restaurateurs, and so you've had the ability to really learn a lot about sourcing seafood and looking for the best product. And listeners to the Southern Fork will know this next question is coming, because I cover seafood a lot, because frankly, this is my show and I love seafood. But also I'm very, very interested in how it really is an anchor and a foundation for a lot of Southern cuisine. And I wonder what you're learning about sustainable seafood. Not that you didn't source your own product before, but, you're doing it from an owner perspective and really thinking about what you're putting on the menu based on the Gulf of Mexico. So can you talk a little bit about, what sustainable seafood means to you, not just as a chef, but as a restaurateur?
I will say that I do think it's a chef's job to source sustainably, and that could mean anything, whether it's your restaurant or not. I think, it's kind of when you're a chef, it's your duty to get the best product. And, this goes back to the craft days where the whole concept of the restaurant relies on the product you get. And so there's not a lot of things on the plate. It comes down to technique and product. And so, for me, that's a really big part of the job, is to just work to get the best seafood and the best product we can get. There's tons of great farms. The farms here are amazing. So, that's been a really easy part to just see all the beautiful things that the farmers grow in and around Birmingham and bring those in. But then, the seafood is honestly a challenge, and to get sustainable seafood is a really big challenge, and that's not for the South, but that's for everywhere. And I think it's something that everyone needs to pay more attention to. There's a lot of seafood in every grocery store, and most of them are farm raised in a foreign country, and so
it's like less than, it's something like, at one point it was 4% of shrimp sold in the U.S. were caught here.
Mm-hmm.
So
mm-hmm.
I'm sure that number is outdated. I don't have that in front of me, but I think what overwhelms all of us at this stage who are not in professional sourcing circles like you is that, we have to make so many micro decisions to put food on the plate, right? Mm-hmm. So, and some of those decisions need to be based on the environment, but some of them need to be based on taste. And I know that for a chef, the flavor and the quality on that final plate matter first. And that goes hand in hand with sustainability. How does it taste different? Like, how does a fish taste different that you're sourcing today than some of the ones that you've tasted in the past?
For instance, today there's a great company in the Gulf, and they're called My Gulf Wild, and they have several different boats, and they're not these long trip boats, but they're more quick trip boats. They'll fish for a couple days and come back. Some boats will go 14 days and come back, and so they catch snapper on day 2, and then now you get the fresh snapper and it's already 2 weeks old, and they've gone in and cut the belly off, and they've taken a fish that's waterproof and cut it open, and then they put it in ice, which is tap water, which really starts to break down the fish.
Not the wild company that you're talking about, but traditional sourcing? Yeah,
like commercial, general commercial fishermen. And so My Gulf Wild, they will do some whole fish, where they don't cut the fish open, but even the ones where they do gut the fish, they're super fresh because they're just they're quick trip boats. So, and they also tag all the fish, so you're able to scan the fish and see who the captain was on the boat, and see what the method they used to catch the fish and when they caught it. And all kinds of fun information just from a QR code that's on a tag. So I really appreciate that, and I think it's a big step in sustainability. And the reality is that the commercial fishing industry just kind of needs to be looked at, and it's not, it's this industry that hasn't changed. And my dad fished this way, and his dad fished this way, and this is how we fish. And it's, built to bring in quantity of fish and make as much money as possible. And, I guess they're doing that now because they're still out there. But, one of the big things that we could catch less fish if we could use more of the fish, because, a whole fish is brought in. Well, most people are buying fillet of fish. I mean, there's not a whole lot of people going to the supermarket saying, oh, I'll take whatever you have as a whole fish, and I'm going to take it home and or even cut it for me and wrap up the bones and the head and the collars and the cheeks, and I'm going to use those later. It's more of like, all right, we have 50% yield at best on the fillets, and then the rest of the 50% of the fish we throw in the trash can, or sell to a company to use for some kind of feed or something like that, or fertilizer. And so that's a big part of it too. We need to use the whole fish. And so that's kind of a thing we've made a commitment to, is that we get all of our fish in whole, and we figure out how to use as much of the fish as we can. And, we're learning a lot of different things. There's a great chef in Australia named Josh Nyland, and he's a very young chef, but he's an innovator in what he does with fish. And if you haven't checked him out, you should look him up. But, just following some of his recipes, we've been able to make really tasty fish cracklings or fish chips out of just the eyeballs and tapioca starch. There's a swim bladder in fish, and if you boil it and then dehydrate it and then fry it, you can make a really crispy, tasty, sort of like a beef tendon type thing. So, and then it's more about like, why don't we look at fish like we do pork and beef? Because there's a big movement about the whole pig that happened, and everyone's using the whole pig, and everybody wants to eat pig's feet and trotters and belly and whatever. But it hasn't really happened yet with fish. And so, I think we need to start looking at fish like that. And also in the way we harvest fish, I think is very important, because the way they're harvested now, fish are commercially harvested. They are caught and then brought onto the deck and left to suffocate. And so they, spend the last 20 minutes of their life just suffocating. So you wouldn't take pigs or cows and drown them to harvest them. You kill them humanely. And so, that comes back to like a spear fisherman that I have that brings me a lot of fish when he's actively fishing and in his spearfishing tournaments. And the quality of his fish next to a commercially caught fish is like night or day, or night and day to me. Like it's so much higher of a quality that I would be willing to pay a lot more money for it. And I think, once we tell the story about the fish and talk about it a little bit more, then people eating the fish would recognize the quality more and be willing to pay more for it.
So just to circle back, you mentioned that, when somebody commercially cuts open a fish, it's like it's a time clock of how long that fish is going to last, right?
Absolutely.
Versus being a waterproof whole fish. And obviously, if you're buying it, I can, and have proven that I can, Adam, clean and dress a fish. But, I have Abundant Seafood down the street and Marhefka, and I can go in there and they will clean and dress it for me then. But it's done right then, and then it's going to be in my broiler oven within, a couple hours later that day. So what does tap water do to a fish? Because I'm always rinsing my fish in tap water, and sometimes if fish is frozen, people will tell us to like thaw it in tap water.
Well, what we found is that, the traditional way to kind of, everyone thinks, you get that fish on ice because it's going to keep it cold and it's going to help it stay fresher longer. Tap water is a foreign substance to fish, and I think it's as easy as thinking about a fillet of beef. Like, you would never put a fillet of beef on ice because the water would be waterlogged, so the water gets in the flesh and starts to deteriorate the fish. So, we do a special process on the spear caught fish where we'll take the scales off with a knife, and we take the gills and guts out, and kind of once we open the fish up, we can take the gills and guts out in kind of one swoop where it's real clean, and then we go in and kind of meticulously get the blood away from the flesh and try to clean out the inside. And so once we do that, just a fish with skin and no blood inside of it and no gills or guts, we can then take that fish and hang it, instead of putting it on ice at that point, we kind of dry it out. And so
like
what it does
cooler, like in a walk-in.
Right. We can hang it in our
just
walk-in.
Like a piece of beef.
Just like a piece of beef, you would take it and hang it, and some of that moisture will kind of come out and the flavor intensifies. And so, if we were to do that to a red snapper, for instance, and, within 4 or 5 days of it hanging up, it's got a really tight skin. The fillets are some of the moisture has come out, and so the flavor is intensified and actually cooks a lot faster than it would have just a fresh piece of fillet right out of the water.
That reminds me of Robert Phelan. Do you remember him from One-Eared Stag in
I do,
Atlanta?
yeah.
And he would do that with chicken. And I'd be like, what? You dry-aged chicken? Like, no one wants to hear that. But it's kind of the same process, right? It's intensifying and removing some of that moisture.
Right. And it has to do with the skin as well. You can get a lot crispier skin when you cook the fish. And if it were wet, you wouldn't achieve the same crispiness.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. And there was a lot of crispy fish skin at Automatic Seafood. So when I was there, it was packed. And, everybody was eating all the things and everybody was excited. And Justin was the person who took care of us. He's very invested, and the restaurant had a great time. Everyone there seemed to really be invested in working there. What is making you hungry now, Chef? I mean, you're kind of through this first big hump. You're through the opening. You're through something you never saw coming with the pandemic. And you're really starting to figure out some of these specific things. I mean, you're definitely dialing in really specific processes. What are you looking forward to now?
Well, I am looking forward to finding a kind of a collection of fishermen who will be able to provide a more humanely killed fish and a better product, which I actually have a phone call today with a guy out of Destin who's a big time spear fisherman. And he's excited. He wants to find a restaurant where he can get his fish to. So, I'm excited about things like that. I'm excited about trying to find a better way to fish and show people that there is a more humane way to kill fish, and it actually tastes and looks better. And, there's kind of a different way to do it.
What's one aspect of this job as chef? We're going to leave out the owner part because we didn't talk about that so much today, and that's a whole nother conversation. But you've been a chef for a long time. Even though you're young, you started really young, just like many chefs do. So what is an aspect of it that really meshes like a puzzle piece, fits like a puzzle piece with an aspect of your natural personality?
Well, I like to work with a team. I love the idea of having, a team and everybody having a common goal and defining the goal and trying to get to that point. And I think, also there's the aspect of there's a whole lot of things going on at one time that fits well with me because I like to think about a lot of different things at once. So I really don't like to. It's just kind of how my mind works. But actually,
yeah, we have no choice on that. If I'm with you there, I'm like, no. I had a phone call earlier today where she was like, you need to choose one of these paths. I'm like, oh, okay. Gonna do all this. But you sound pretty calm. So, you're in these really busy restaurants. Would you consider yourself calm and when the line is hopping on a Saturday night?
I think that would be fair to say. Yeah. At least I like to think of myself being calm. I don't know. You probably could ask the guys and gals that work for me that if that's me. But most of the time I am. And it's not. A lot of things are going to happen, and they always have, and they always will. And so, I think it's really more about how you handle the situation and why not be calm about it? There's no reason to get upset.
What's keeping you up at night? Besides, I think there's a baby, right?
Yeah, the 4-month-old little boy is keeping me up quite a bit and keeps my wife up a lot more than me. But the industry's kind of changing, and there's a lot of people have left the industry when they got furloughed. When the pandemic set in. And so I think trying to, we kind of never stopped when the pandemic hit. We just kind of thought, here's what we can do now. So we're going to do it. And now that we're in it, we've been in it for so long and kind of never stopped. It's time to kind of figure out what the industry is going to become so that we can become that too, so that we can, continue to bring in good people and work with great people that are like-minded. And so I think about that a lot.
It's time for
your magic picnic basket. So I did bring it down to Birmingham. I missed connecting with you there, but with this basket, I can time travel. I can go back and ask anybody to make anything that you would just like one more taste of. I can source for you, and I just would love to bring you some of your favorite things. They don't have to go together. So what can I put in the basket?
Well, what I get most excited about is this is sort of a kind of a dream meal. Some sort of raw, marinated, chilled seafood tower. I love raw clams. There's not a lot of people that eat a lot of raw clams in the South. We have some great clams out of Florida that I think are really quite good, and I think there's great clams in off the coast of Charleston too. I think you can get really good clams there.
Yeah, by Clamor Dave.
Yeah, exactly. I used to get clams from him when I was at the Optimist. I don't think they come as far as Birmingham, but I could get them from Florida. And so, really great raw oysters and clams and marinated crab claws. And I'm really into just eating all of the fish that we get in raw. It's really interesting to taste all of the fish raw, especially before we cook them. And even if we're going to only cook them, then I think it's important to taste them raw with just a little sea salt on them. It's not often you get a shellfish or seafood tower in front of you.
Except for you. So you've really taken a 360 here based from what you told us about your childhood,
Oh, yeah.
On the Gulf. But that's something that you have access to every day in some way or not. Is there something that you don't have access to that you would love to try again?
Oh, man. In Birmingham, there are some great Asian restaurants, but there's not the variety that I had in New York and or even Atlanta on Buford Highway. So I would probably say a really great Vietnamese spread, I think would be what I would choose.
Well, if you want to learn more about Adam Evans and basically somebody who's obsessed with seafood, I told him I could bring him anything in the world and he just wants what's in his restaurant, then you can go to thesouthernfork.com. I'm going to have links there as well as images so you can see the beautiful food that I got to enjoy that night as well as the face behind the voice. If you like what you hear and you're into visiting Birmingham, there's a lot more Birmingham content from this year, and there's also a lot of seafood content peppered through more than 250 interviews. So thank you so much for chatting with me today, Adam. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me, and I enjoyed the conversation.
Hello and welcome to Talking with My Mouth Full. I know we've been talking about seafood, and I just like to bend your ear just for a minute more about that. But specifically, an article that I wrote recently for Southeastern Dispatch. And it wasn't on fish, but actually on bivalves, on oysters, and more specifically, how oyster bars are designed. I've been covering food in the South for a long time, and when I first started, I promise you that oyster bars were not the thing. They weren't around that much. Where I live in Charleston, definitely, and Savannah, where I get to visit. You even heard me speak earlier this year to Julia Sullivan, who's the chef at Henrietta Red in Nashville. She has an amazing oyster program there too. So oysters have become very ubiquitous at nice restaurants in the South. And on top of that, oyster bars can really add another level of beauty to the restaurant and more seats. They can add more revenue and just a fun other place to gather besides just a beverage bar. So if you want to check that out, It's in a publication called Southeastern Dispatch. This is a new digital magazine, and for those of you that are in the Carolinas or visit the Carolinas, then this digital mag is going to be right up your alley. I've written a couple pieces for them. It's edited by Robert Moss, who you might remember from the show because he's the barbecue editor of Southern Living, and I had him on to chat barbecue, I believe in 2019. So anyway, once again, that's Southeastern Dispatch. When you first click on it, you get a good many articles, so you get a chance to decide if this new magazine might be something that you'd be interested in. But if you like food culture of the Carolinas, I'd highly recommend you check it out. Thanks so much for listening. You know I'm always back here in my walk-in closet talking to you next week. And then, in the meantime, I'm running around researching and writing for publication. So there's always something to chat about.
You've been listening to The Southern Fork. I can't wait to bring you more culinary conversations. But in the meantime, I have one question. Are you going to eat all that?